We are about to be immersed in the real life of Colombians. We're going to take a big journey across unexplored Colombia. We'll learn how people of different generations live and survive, what their values and interests are. We'll visit very rich millionaires and ordinary poor people, those who grow pot and pensioners. We'll discuss hard times, Pablo Escobar, cartels, coffee and politics. We'll visit Latin America's city of sin, where you can buy literally everything. We'll take coca and smoke a joint. We'll discover why, despite all the circumstances, people don't want to leave the country and believe in its prosperity. Also, get ready to be amazed by the incredible beauty of the local nature and, of course, local women. This movie is about the real Colombia you never knew. Enjoy. We start in Medellin, the city of eternal spring, the same city that was the base of Pablo Escobar's infamous cartel. We're at the home of Felipe Andres, a Colombian who used to live in the United States but decided to move back here. This is the first local in Colombia I met and befriended. This guy has also been in Netflix movies. When I arrived at this unusual house, I immediately realized that I was welcome here. So welcome, in fact, that they offered me to try some coca leaves. Yes, the ones used to make the white powder. Once on a trip to Peru, I had already tried these leaves, and I confess, they give a good energy boost and help to overcome confusion at high altitudes. At the time it was 14,700 feet. Now it's much lower, but I could use an energy boost, so I put a couple of leaves in my cheek before filming. Yes, I know it sounds strange, but that's exactly what happened.
Well, what we're doing is we're chewing on pure tobacco, on pure coca leaf, right? And it's the way that the natives here in Colombia consume the leaf or the plant, mostly from the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, up on the northern coast, where the Kogi and Arhuaco, Wiwa and Cancuamo people live. If you know about indigenous cultures, they're the ones that are really well known because they dress all in white, and the men wear like a white type of cap, and they have the mochilas that they carry around, and they always have the coca leaf and what they call the poporo. And the poporo is a natural shell. They take the seashells from the beach and they cook them until they can be broken down into dust. And they put this in this big type of dried seed, which they call the poporo, with a stick. And they take the dry dust and they mix it with the leaf. And what that does is it activates the alkaloid in the leaf and helps you get the true use of the medicine, because what it is a natural medicine. And then there's also the rapé, which is tobacco, which is made into a dust and it's inhaled through the nose. And there's also ambil, which is like a tobacco paste, which they use a lot with the coca leaf. I can show all that to you if you want, after we have the coffee.
Okay. Colombia, I believe, is number 2 in the world who is exporting coffee, right?
Yeah.
Coffee beans and coffee.
Right.
But the coffee I used to drink here the last couple of days doesn't look as a coffee.
Well,
and even outside in the streets, I met some locals who offered me Nescafe.
All right. Yeah.
Wow. What's the problem with that?
Well, the thing is, we're not really gourmet coffee drinkers. It's been the main product, or their insignia product, for many, many years. And the focus was more on the business of exporting large amounts of coffee. In other parts of the world, we have the nice cafes with the nice coffee, right? They got that tradition or that custom before we did, because here was just the business, you know? So here we were talking about, una buena taza de café. You know, that's a good cup of coffee. And here that just means that it's fresh and that you got it prepared by your mother or somebody, you know, that it wasn't really the science behind it. But now we're starting to understand the nuances and how preparing coffee can be a lot better than just having, you know, like instant coffee like you got. It's still a process. We're still learning. You know, we went from coffee growers to coffee consumers. I guess that's what it is. We weren't good consumers, we were just good growers before. Now we're becoming good consumers also. And this coffee that we're gonna have right now is one of the best coffees in Colombia, if not the best. because it's from the Sierra Nevada, Santa Marta, prepared by the Arawakan people, the natives, the same people we get the coca leaf from. It's exquisite. Let's try it.
Let's try it. It's gonna be my sixth, I believe, cup today. Yeah. But hopefully the best one. You know, yesterday I was in the center of Medellin, and I saw people taking some stuff like white powder in their nose, but that was not made from coca leaves, I believe.
Oh yeah. The official exportation product is coffee, and the unofficial exportation product is that, what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And what you saw in downtown, I think that's typical of any downtown third world country in the world. You know, wherever you go, if you go to Africa or to Asia or other parts of South America or Latin America, you'll see that in downtown. You'll see the people that live on the street and they consume anything.
So this is your dog?
Yes, this is my dog.
Who lives with your father?
Well, the thing is, we live together. This is my father's house, but my house is next door, and my brother's house is next to my house. So on the property, there's actually 3 houses, and we have a couple little apartments that we rent also. So, like we say in Spanish, vivimos juntos pero no revueltos. We live together but not mixed up. Not mixed together. We live together but not mixed together.
For how long do you live here?
We've been living in this house for 15 years. And before that, we lived in another house for 15 years, which is in total 30. I was born here in Medellin, but I grew up, I spent my childhood in Alaska.
In Alaska?
Yeah.
How come?
Because my mother's from Alaska. She's from the United States, and my father, it was his childhood dream to go live in Alaska.
Why?
Because it's kind of a neat story. When he was 5 years old, he traveled to New York with my grandparents, and he went to the Museum of Natural History there in Manhattan. And so my father saw that, and he saw all the things about the different animals and the different native people there, and he fell in love with that when he was 5 years old. And he never forgot his dream to go to Alaska. So he convinced like 5 of his best friends from college, and they took off to Alaska. And my mother had been living in Alaska since she was 4 years old because my grandfather was a Baptist missionary. Knowing people in common, they met, and when they got pregnant, my father, he hadn't been to Colombia in many, many years, and it was important for him, for his children to have that connection with his country, with Colombia. So that's why he wanted me to be born here. So
this building looks like a museum, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it feels like every corner of this building is designed with passion. Your father did it.
Yes. He mixes a lot of that Alaskan sort of influence, but with also Colombian traditional architecture. I was born here in Medellin, and I lived in Alaska until I was 12. I would come back on vacation every year, so I spoke Spanish. I mean, I spoke more English, but I was bilingual, bicultural, I guess you could say. And when I was 12, I moved back for the first time for a full year. This was in 1989, and it was actually the worst year to be living in Medellin that year, 89 to 90. It was when the violence was just out of control and the cartel was doing its worst here in the city. And I went back to Alaska on vacation, and I got off the plane and I told my mother, Mom, I'm not on vacation, I'm coming back to Alaska. And I stayed there for a year and a half, and then I came back when I was 14, 15. I lived here, I did high school, I finished high school here, and then I moved back to the United States for a couple of years when I was 18, like to become a man and, you know, do my own thing and learn how to do everything from washing dishes to construction and working at a grocery store and working at a bank and doing all that. And then I moved back to Colombia when I was 21, and I've been here ever since. And that's when I started my acting career. I'm an actor, and that's basically what I do now.
How much money does it bring you?
Well, when there's work, it brings in decent money. Not like in the United States where actors make, you know, a lot of money. Here you can do well, but the thing is, you don't have a job all the time. You know, you can work for 6 months and then not have a work for a year. So I also do I do voiceovers, I do narrating, I actually just recently recorded the voice for a new National Geographic documentary about the hippos in Colombia.
You have Colombian and the United States passport?
Yeah, yes.
Both?
Yes, yes.
And you can live in any country?
Yeah.
But you decided to live here, to come back?
Yeah.
What was the reason behind that?
I'm Colombian, and I feel a very strong connection to my country, even though I don't look Colombian, right? I look more American or North American or European, but I was born here, and I've always felt that I'm Colombian. When I was a child, I always thought, for example, that the mother of my children would be Colombian, and that's the way it is. I have a daughter, and she was born here in Colombia, and there's just something about this country that it's just welcoming. You feel it with the way people are, the way people treat you. You know, the attitude of the people. It's usually very positive. Of course, you know, there's problems and all this stuff, but the normal attitude of the Colombian is to be nice, to be welcoming. We Colombians, we love our country, and we love being here. With all the problems that it has or had, because it's gotten a lot better over the past years. It's no longer what we see like in Narcos in the series. It's not like that anymore. You know, Colombia has evolved and progressed a lot. One of the main proofs of that is tourism. Tourism here has just exploded. You know, it's become one of the biggest businesses now, and you go to any city or any place in Colombia, and you'll see people from all over the world traveling and visiting. And I like to say it was about time, because Colombia has so much to give, you know. Not just the coffee, and it's an amazing country. You have snow-capped mountains, and you have deserts, and of course you have the jungle. You have everything in Colombia, and I think it has a lot to do with the geography of Colombia. We're at the place where South America starts. If you come down, you know, from North America, Central America, and then you have Colombia, which has the two oceans, right? We're the only country that has beaches on the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, and that always made us a strategic place for geopolitics in this part of the world. And I think that's why when the drug trade started, Colombia was the country, was the place that was the most strategic for the drug trade. And I believe that we talk about the drugs as such, right? That it's the drugs. But when you analyze it, it has a lot to do also with the prohibition. You know, at one time, cocaine was legal in the United States and Europe, everywhere, and it became illegal because of a political decision, and that empowered the criminals. It created a huge business for people that would be criminals even if there wasn't drugs. They would find some other business that was illegal because that's what mafias do. They exist because there are laws, and their idea is that laws are made to be broken, you know? And because of that specific situation of Colombia, because of our geography, because of a lot of what happened here in Colombia in the past century, or 2 centuries, it became sort of a melting pot that made that very possible with the social differences, because like all Latin American countries, you have a very distinct difference between the richer classes and the lower income classes, right? And so this was a way for the criminals or the mafias to grow, because it was an opportunity for people that had no opportunities to make money. Right, to make money, exactly. Pablo Escobar was born a very poor man, in a very poor family, and he became at one point the second richest man in the world. So through this illegality. But I believe that it wasn't so much his capacity to be a criminal or a capo or a mastermind, but it was also the fact that he was given this white powder because it was prohibited, right? It was illegal, and that was what made him so powerful, that he could use this thing, and it spread through all of society. We have the stereotype, and the stereotype is true, but there is so much more to our culture, to our country, than just that. And I think that's what the world is discovering now also.
The place we're heading to is not just one of the most beautiful locations in Colombia, but the region that was home to the ancient Quimbaya civilization. They had secret technologies for mining and processing gold. A lot of ancient artifacts have been found in this area. The shape looks pretty familiar, doesn't it? The Quimbaya civilization disappeared between the 15th and 17th century. Like many other indigenous peoples of the Americas, it was wiped out by the European conquerors. The settlements of Native Americans who lived peacefully in this beautiful river valley for 2,500 years simply disappeared from the face of the earth, leaving behind a huge golden heritage, the rumors of which spread out around the world, and hundreds of thousands of people obsessed with a desire to gain a quick fortune came here in search of that mythical city of El Dorado. Nowadays, the area is known as a part of Colombia's coffee triangle. The coffee that grows here is exported all over the world and is considered one of the best. Giovanni, a local who grew up in these parts and knows everything about them, will tell us what is so unique about this region.
My name is Giovanni Andres Gaviria. I was born here in Colombia. I'm 28 years old and I was born in a town close to here. It's called El Cairo. It's a very nice town. It's part of coffee region as well, which is the region where you are. So Colombia is super famous for coffee. I mean, it's famous for a lot of stuff. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, but I guess definitively in all the story, coffee has been one of the best ambassadors of Colombia. Everybody knows that from Colombia we produce a very good coffee. So there is in a region in a specific, that is the area where you are, and this is coffee region. So Colombia is divided like by states. In Colombia we have 32 and 22 of them produce coffee. So there are 3 of them in a specific that are super famous, and this is the place where we are. So now in a specific, we are in Salento. Salento is one of the most colorful towns that we have in the region. They have a unique architecture that it is like a result of the mixture. In general, in a specific, I can tell you that the most spectacular things about my region is a result of the mixture. The music, for example, we have some Spanish instruments, we have some indigenous instruments, we have some African instruments.
Lo que te quiero decir es que regreses mañana, porque si tú no regresas.
And the music is a mixture. The color of my skin, for example, is also a result of the mixture. The color of my hair, right? Indigenous, Spanish, Africans. And I guess all this mixture is making like a unique result in the area. That's why UNESCO came here and they said, oh, this area, we should protect it. And that's why they declared us a World Heritage, because of all those different kind of characteristics. This area produces a lot of coffee, right? One of the main reasons is because right here, just behind us, we have volcanoes. We have about more than 7 volcanoes. Some of them are still active, right? Some of them are so high, we're talking about more than 5,000 meters. And they have snow at the top. We call them nevados, right? So right here, very close to us, we have a natural national park. So those volcanoes, in their activity, they produce ashes, and those ashes fall to the ground and they become nutrients, right? Maybe you wonder about the weather here. Here is very interesting because different from other parts of the planet, this area is always the same weather. Like today we got...
Like in paradise.
Like in paradise.
I feel like in paradise.
Exactly. So we have rain, we have sun, we have rain, we have sun, but...
We just had sun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it just changes. It's just
it was so hot, and like in 5 minutes, it looks like it's gonna be raining now.
You know what is fun? Some people ask me, hey Giovanni, how's gonna be the weather? And I say, you know, I never know. I never know. So people, when they come here, they should be ready for everything, right? That's like the surprise of the day, right? So, for example, today we'll be very lucky. We are just having a beautiful weather. So, based on that, we have a very good weather, we have a very good soil, but we have also very hardworking people, right? Years and years ago, the first group of humans that live in the area, they were not the people that we know now. Years ago, they were indigenous, the first group of people. They were called los Quimbayas. Very famous for gold. They made very, very nice figures of gold because they thought that the gold was like the way as they got contact with their divinities, right? And this is why the Spanish people, they like to come here. They wanted to see El Dorado, the famous city made by gold. So they thought that it was in the area because our indigenous, they really dress by gold, right? So Los Quimbayas, they got like different groups. So one of them were Los Quindos. That's why the name of this department, this state where we are, it's called Quindío. Because Quindo means like gods in the mountains. Those mountains that we see around, they thought that they were like ancestors, like divinities. So they came here, they asked for advice, they came to say thanks, right? So that's why they got like a very, very important thing about the mountains, the nature, and the indigenous. This place where we are is called Valle de Cocora, right? Cocora, in specific, for example, is the name of an indigenous princess that lived years ago in the area. So in honor to her, they placed Valle de Cocora, right? So this place has a lot of indigenous stuff, and this place in specific is very important. It's very spiritual for them. And years ago, in the place where we are, maybe in this stone where we are, there were some indigenous saying thanks to the nature for everything, right? So the issue is that the Spanish came here, and when they came here, they were looking mainly for gold. And they were mainly looking for gold, not only in Colombia. They brought some silver from Peru, Ecuador, Colombia. They took it to Cartagena in Colombia as well. That was a big port. And from Cartagena, they took it to Spain. So in this area, they didn't have cars, they didn't have buses like today. They got horses. That's why the horses are so important for us. They got mules, right? So they were arrieros, people that they took the transportation by mules, right? So most of our families, for example, they came here for this business because the main road between Peru, Ecuador, Colombia to Cartagena crossed Salento. This is why Salento was founded. Salento was founded like a town, a village in the middle of the national pathway, the royal pathway that we call in that period of time, and that was connecting all those areas. So that's how the first group of people came here. And the first reason why they came here was mainly looking for this connection with the road, but also for growing potatoes, right? So this area was mainly very grown by potatoes.
Which you had at our breakfast,
Exactly.
early morning.
Exactly, a typical breakfast. The typical breakfast here in Colombia is we call sopa, right? And the sopita is that you get like a chicken broth with potatoes. Potatoes are super important for Colombia. And in Colombia, you can find hundreds of different varieties of potatoes. And I can tell you, you eat potatoes in breakfast, you eat potatoes in lunch, and you eat potatoes in the dinner. It's super important.
That's what I did in the 90s when our family didn't have any money to survive. So we eat just potatoes, which we took from our garden. You know what's weird? We had a coffee today in the morning. And Colombia is so famous for coffee. There are lots of plantations here and coffee producers. You export this coffee all around the world. But the coffee I used to have in this morning, it was like a coffee, a water that spent a week next to coffee. Something like that.
Yes, you're right.
What's wrong with that?
No, I can tell you, that's something very fun about us, and is that, I mean, in Colombia, we produce one of the best coffees of the planet, and we are the third largest producer after Brazil and Vietnam. But in Colombia, we had a historical issue. Is that in Colombia, we produce very good coffee, but most of this coffee is exported out, right? One single bag of Colombian coffee is about $15. For Colombians, it's super expensive. So that's why the local businesses, what they do is that they buy the coffee to the farmers, and the best, they select it and they export it. But the second quality, like the lowest quality, they keep it in Colombia. And they over roast it, right? And that's why we have sugar, we have milk, we have all that. And we don't drink really coffee, right? But this is something that is changing, right? Our farmers now and the Colombian people now is being awarded that in Colombia we're producing a very good coffee, and that we need the opportunity to taste it, the real Colombian coffee. So that's why most of the restaurants, most of the cafeterias, maybe you won't find a very good coffee, but now I'm so happy for that now farmers, for example, it's very nice. They started to learn how to roast the coffee, how to produce their own coffee, and now they are exporting their own coffee. In my personal opinion, this is the future of the coffee business in my country. So in that way, in Colombia, when we wake up, we just open our eyes. Our grandma or our mother is waiting for us. Hey, mijo, here are los tragos. So los tragos is the first coffee that you have. This is the welcome to your life. You're happy that you awoke today. So we call that los tragos. In general, the coffee for us is not coffee, it's tinto, right? But that you have to be very careful with this, because if you go to Argentina or Chile, you ask for a tinto, they will give you wine. So tinto is only in Colombia, and they will give you a cup of coffee. Then we have the medianueves between 9 and 10, and then you have another coffee, right? Then you have in the afternoon another coffee. And then after dinner you have another coffee. So coffee is all the time with us. It's in our blood, I can tell you.
But is it the same which you had in the morning?
In most of the Colombian families, yes.
Because it was like a soup made of coffee.
Yes, what we do is that, first of all, our coffees are Arabicas, so our coffees are smooth. So in your countries, for example, you find that your coffees are very intense and they have a high body. And it's because they use Robusta, for example, or they have very, very deep extractions. In Colombia, we are famous for producing the smoothest coffee, the softest coffee. So culturally, our coffees are like a soup of coffee. They are a little bit softer than normal. But this is the typical tinto. That's when you ask a tinto, they will give you like an Americano.
I'm interested about people living in this region and how they particularly differ from other Colombians, like in Medellin, Bogota, Cartagena.
Ooh, that's a very good question. I guess one of the reasons why the cafeteros, that is how we are very well known in Colombia, los cafeteros, the people from coffee, is first of all because all our mornings starts with a coffee. That's the first thing. And second, I guess we are very hardworking people, right? Our grandparents, they came here by mule and they came here looking for land to grow something. So we are people that we are very deep into agriculture. So we are very hard workers and we love our land. Our land is our house, right? It's also our food, but it's also our family, our histories, our traditions, our ancestors. So the land for us is super important, right? We have a very big respect for the land, and I guess this is something that is very unique. The accent in any way as well. A very interesting phenomena, right? The first phenomenon is that it was a moment when the people from Antioquia, they came here looking for land for working, for planting stuff, right? And developing agriculture, so they came here. We call that la colonización antioqueña, so they came here. But then we have people from the south that they heard that those areas, they were very fertile, they were good for business, right? And they were very well connected, and it was nice people here. So we got people also from the south coming here. Then later on, that we started with the violence, the FARC, the ELN, and all those guerrillas that we got in the period of time.
Guerrillas?
Yes.
Why you call them guerrillas?
We call them guerrillas because they started as the revolutionary groups in the 1960s. And those groups, they started being farmers that they work for their personal interests and the community interests about the agricultural conditions and all that. But later on, sadly, with the story and the years, they become drug traffickers, right? And I guess this is something that has been very deep in my region, and it's because these people, these very hardworking people, and these people that have been living in the countryside. But it was a moment, my friend, that it was no way, it was not possible to live in the area. They come to your house and say, hey, my friend, do you have food for me and my group? You couldn't say no, right? They were the guerrillas coming with weapons to your house, and they were saying, okay, so I will give you food. But then it was coming another group, you gave food to these people, and they were killing the family. It was a very complicated period of time. That was mainly from the 1980s, 1990s to the beginning of the 2000s. And in this moment, we got an issue that a lot of families had to abandon their farms, right? Or they had to stay. But the only one opportunity to stay is they grew coca. Or you grow coca and you stay with us, or you have to leave the territory, right? So in any way, my people, my Colombian people, is people that in any way that have been suffering for the drugs. And the drugs in any way, they were plantations, they were forced by the guerrillas. You produce it or you leave it, right? Here, I'm so happy that in coffee region, it was not like this, right? Because most of the guerrillas and most of the drug traffickers, they like the places in the edges of Colombia, close to the borders with other countries and places with jungle, where they could hide the plantations, where they could hide the groups, and just in case that the army was coming, they jumped into the border and they couldn't go there. So this is why coffee region in a specific, they didn't get directly affected by the cocoa plantations, right? So it's not true that we grow coffee and coca at the same place. That's what people say. So here, the effect was different. Here, I always say that was like their Miami Beach, right? That was the place to enjoy. That was the place to have their mansions, the houses, the cars, and also the girlfriends, right? They said that the most beautiful women, the prettiest women in Colombia are from Medellin and from coffee region.
Why?
I guess personally that is because of this mixture. So the ladies have the best from the African groups, from the indigenous groups, and from the Spanish. So for this mixture in specific, I guess the prettiest women are in this region. But this is something very relative, but that's what people say, right? So this is why most of those drug traffickers like Pablo Escobar, Carlos Ledrin, specific from this region that was born here in Armenia, they got here their mansions close to their families that were also safe places for their families, right? Because they got a lot of army, a lot of police, 3 cities very close together. So this is why this place was mainly affected by this, right? That those guys, they were living here and they were having their luxury houses, luxury cars in the area. Sadly, for that reason, we got a period of time when the girls, for example, they like to be the girlfriends of those guys, and they like the plastic surgeries, and we got a culture of plastic surgeries per years. But I'm so happy that this is changing a lot, and this change takes generations and a lot of education. My Colombia now, my region now, my women now are super different, right?
It's my first time in Colombia, but I see that maybe every third woman is with plastic surgery effects. Why is it so popular, and why ladies are doing butts and breasts and everything?
I guess that was a cultural issue that started with the drug dealers. The drug dealers wanted to show off that they got money, right? And one of the ways to get money is because plastic surgeries are crazily expensive. So if I have a woman...
It used to be crazy.
It's still crazily expensive. But in that period of time was a way to show that, hey, I have money, right? So I'm from the
So why
high
is it doing
society.
it now?
They want that people identify that they got a plastic surgery. Because I mean, I got a friend who is a surgeon, he's very famous. And this guy told me, Giovanni, I mean, sometimes we recommend the ladies to do it in a way that they can highlight their attributes, but you don't notice it directly. But women said, no, I want that it noticed, right? They want
Really?
to show, yes. Some of them, they like to show with their surgeries that they have money or that they are in another level of society.
Do you personally like it when the ladies are enhanced?
Being honest, no. Being honest, no, because I guess this is a memory. I guess this is a memory of those very complicated times. We were very sexist, right? I'm so happy that now it's changing, but years ago, we were very sexist, right? So now it's changing with the education again, and generation by generation is changing. In each family that they take a decision to educate the Colombian child in a different way.
Hey folks, for the past 15 years I've spent at least 6 months a year away from home making movies in different countries. My channel is dedicated to incredible stories of people's lives in different parts of our planet. I meet both expats and locals, explore unique places you may not have heard of, and inspire you to travel. Let's explore this world together. I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the channel, and please let me know in the comments if you like this movie and what country you're watching from. I was lured to Colombia by a couple, Emil and Nastya. They have been living here for the last 3 years. They moved here after 10 years of living in Barcelona. The guys are wholeheartedly in love with Colombia, and they make everyone fall in love with it too. I personally experienced this by traveling with them through the whole country in 2 weeks. They arrange their own tours with deep immersion in the local culture and also help with a lot of organizational issues that those who want to move to Colombia for permanent residence can face. We are pulling up to visit a Colombian millionaire Marco, who went to the same school as Pablo Escobar's son and nephew. But don't draw premature conclusions about how he became a millionaire. He and his family had nothing to do with selling drugs. However, they did have a lot to do with coffee. They have been in the coffee business for decades, growing hundreds of thousands of coffee plants and selling them all over the world. Marco is also building a successful career in politics here, serving as the Secretary General of the Pereira municipality. You have a very interesting family history. One of your ancestors was in the coffee business. Your father, as far as I know, lost interest in it and entered the construction business. And then he got back into the coffee business. Today coffee is one of your main focuses, which is probably what you are doing, among other things. Can you tell us a little bit more about it, please?
In the 70s, my father bought land here, in the Pereira area. which was then the city's outskirts. He bought them solely to grow coffee. But in the 90s, the coffee business declined. So my father decided to move to Medellin, where he worked for private companies and did other things. At that time, he leased these lands to people who were growing coffee in the area. The city of Pereira was very small at that time, and gradually it started to grow. About 10 years ago, we bought this estate, which was also purely for coffee. We decided to start growing all kinds of things here. Today we have banana, sycamore, lemon, and of course, coffee. But today we grow coffee mainly for our own consumption, for ourselves, and for friends and guests of our house. We also do more sports, which has been a big passion of mine since childhood. We built a gym and a small cafe where we organize events.
We're basically the same age. You are 44, I'll be 43 soon. You and I were in different countries in the 90s. Ukraine, which was part of the former USSR, had difficult times in the 90s. I sometimes wonder how I managed to stay alive and I survived long enough to be able to interview you today. Meanwhile, here in Colombia, especially in Medellin where you lived, it was probably even more difficult. How did you survive your childhood? And how has Colombia changed over these past 44 years? You probably remember 30 of them. And let's take a walk around your homestead, show us how you live here.
You make a good point. In the 90s, there was a lot of violence, a lot of bloodshed. I went to the best school in Medellin, in San Jose. And Pablo Escobar's son went to that same school. His nephew was my classmate. We saw with our own eyes how they lived, how they behaved. So, we always tried to stick to the right side and stay away from evil they were involved in. However, at the time, a lot of young guys couldn't make the right choice. Many of them didn't live to see today. But there are also others who did the right thing, who studied, who got educated. And today we are successful, well-off people who can enjoy the modern Colombia that we have today. Because Colombia today is not all about drug trafficking and Pablo Escobar. Not at all. Colombia is about wonderful scenery, stunning weather, gorgeous and kind-hearted people who surround you. And also, people who, like you, come to learn and experience this new country of ours for what it has become. You see, there are many people here who are ready to accept you, who are ready to help you from the bottom of their hearts. And this is the way we live today. This is who we really are.
You come from a pretty well-off family. I'd say this is my impression that you come from a rich family. Probably one of the richest families here in Colombia. How did your parents raise you? Were they strict with you or not? Did they give you money, let you do whatever you wanted? And what values did they try to instill in you from an early age?
My parents are actually from middle-class backgrounds. My father was born in a small town in the mountains, and my mother is from the coast. They both went to Medellin in search of a better life and education. That's where they met. At that stage, our family didn't have that much money. They took out a loan to send my brother and me to a good school. But throughout our lives, from childhood until today, we were taught to be helpful, honest, listen, and help others. And today we are still doing that, and we keep on helping, even solving the life problems of all our employees, so that their lives become better too.
You were classmates with Pablo Escobar's nephew and schoolmates with his son. I have two questions. The first is, did you have any conflicts with them? Did you interact with them? Second, did they use the stuff that their father was selling all over the world?
I didn't see them with drugs, but they had guns all the time. 14, 15-year-old kids walking around armed, both from this clan and from other clans. And they had armed guards. But we never saw them using drugs. I had contacted with Pablo's nephew and son. We had a friendly, amicable relationship. But I never went to their home, to their summer house. And I never invited them to my house either. But there was one such incident during school. This was the period when there were several different strong drug clans. And the son of another drug trafficker named Pelusa was harassing me and trying to gang up on me with his group of friends. At that moment, Pablo Escobar's nephew appears out of nowhere, stands up for me and says, "Don't touch him, or we'll have family problems between us." And that was the end of the conflict. That was the end of it. I actually have very fond memories of this guy. He was always friendly to me. But unfortunately, after school, a few years later, I found out that he was killed in Medellin during one of the clashes. And the guy who tried to come at me then, Pilusa, I met him on the coast 10 years after graduation. I was even a little scared at first when I saw him, but he was friendly to me. "What's up, buddy? Let's go to my summer house." Naturally, I didn't go there. And then, a couple of years later, I heard that he'd been killed too.
Marco will show us his coffee plantations a little later, but now let's move back to the coffee triangle of Colombia, namely to the town of Jardín. It's a colorful town immersed in flowers, as it should be considering its poetic name garden. Jardín has remained the same as it was 150 years ago and is on the list of cultural heritage of the country. We were met by a local farmer Juan, jumped into his SUV and drove off high into the mountains above this town. The day before there had been a rock slide on the main road, so instead of 15 minutes it took us all 30 to get up. But once there, we realized that half of an hour of bumpy ride was definitely worth it. The guy was born in Bogota, the capital of Colombia. After graduating from university, he went to Belgium for an internship. When he returned to Colombia, he got a job at a bank. But life in a bustling city of millions of people didn't suit him. Juan felt a powerful call of nature. He quit his job in the capital and went on a great journey across the country in search of his place of power. Not far from the town of Jardín in the mountains, he found a plot of land, which he soon purchased, and now he grows and sells fruits and vegetables. He also built a guest house and now receives tourists from all over the world. What are you doing now? You have a small business here, you have people coming to visit you, it's a fantastic view, but you are not from here.
During my stay in Europe, I traveled a lot. In Italy, in Slovenia, and other countries. And during this travel, I realized deep inside that I wanted to live in a place surrounded by nature. When I came back to Colombia, I traveled through the whole country and I found myself in this place. And I made the decision to move here. It was like a call of my heart to go to nature, to live in nature, to build a house, to start a family, to live like this, in the wilderness. Before that, I was a bank employee, and my whole family called me a fool. They didn't understand what drove me to leave all this city life and settle here. But I did it.
So what motivated you to come here? To leave Bogota, the capital, your entire life, your big success, and come here and just live in the countryside, raise your children here, get married here, meet your wife from Switzerland and enjoy these views every day?
That was actually the leap I had to make, to get out of the comfort zone I was in. I left everything I had behind to experience new things that I was so naturally drawn to. And it was also the call of my heart to get out of the city. The cities of Bogota and Medellin are cities with large populations, 8 million in Bogota and almost 5.5 million in Medellin. Consequently, I couldn't stay in such a large population. I could have settled there, but I chose not to. Colombia is my country, and it's so beautiful here. I listened to myself and came back.
How long did it take to make this place beautiful? How much land do you have here? And how long did it take to set up this place that we see here today?
5 years. It took me 5 years. So we have 6 rooms here. We can accommodate 15 people. The area itself is 5 acres. We grow bananas, tangerines, peaches, lemons, avocados, tomatoes, and some cannabis.
How much did these 5 acres cost you? I assume you bought 5 acres, including this house. The area was not landscaped. How much did it cost you? And how much additional money did you put in to finish the houses, to do the kitchen and everything else? And how much do you need to start your own plantations of bananas, lemons, avocados, and of course cannabis, where you can grow 20 bushes per one house per one person legally?
Initially, I invested about $120,000 when I first got here. Part of the house was already residential and habitable. There were also banana plantations that were producing some crops. Consequently, I used the income from the sale of that crop to finance the cultivation of new plantations in the area. We also used the money we received from renting the lodges to invest in building new ones.
How much money was invested in total?
160,000.
How do tourists find out about you, and how do you promote yourself? And what is the occupancy rate of all your suites, lodges and rooms?
By far, the main platform through which tourists get here is Booking.com. There are also several local channels and people who have stayed here and recommended it to their friends. But mostly, it's all the tourists who come from Booking. Our occupancy varies at the moment. We were almost 100% full during the holidays. Sometimes that can go down to somewhere around 80. During the year, it happens that we drop even to 20 to 30. But the main problem today is the collapse that has happened on the road. The road here takes the whole 35 minutes instead of just 15.
How much this whole travel business thing can bring in a year of net money, revenue, turnover, and how much of that would be profit? If there is any left, of course.
For example, in December, we had a pretty high occupancy rate, and that brought in about 5 million pesos. But the expenses were also high, so we spent around 3.5 to 4 million. After all the expenses, we earned about 1 million net. So our net income is about 1 to 2 million a month. That's about $350. And it's just the income from the tourist rentals. I also have fields and produce that I grow. That brings in extra money. Honestly, I have nothing to complain about.
How much money does your family, you, your wife, and 2 kids spend per month in total?
150,000 to 200,000 a week. That's up to $50. I would also like to point out that 2 million a month would be my salary in Bogota after I had finished my studies and worked in an office. While here I can share all this nature with my children, live in this environment, and earn the same money that would have been difficult for me to earn there, sitting in an office with no nature around.
You lived and traveled around Europe. People would meet you and of course ask you where you're from. You'd say from Colombia. What were the myths and stereotypes in their heads?
First of all, I knew what was coming for me, so I tried to catch them off guard. And I always said, yeah, sure, I'm Colombian. I have a couple grams in my pocket. Do you want to take one now? They would get scared and walk away. But that's actually a very stupid stereotype, because nobody does that here. I don't do it, my friends, we don't do coke. We don't care about it at all.
How has the country changed in the last 20 years?
It's night and day.
What exactly has changed?
When I was 8 years old, my dad was kidnapped.
By who?
Guerrilla gangs. My dad worked in a bank. It was common practice to kidnap bank employees. During a vacation, when we were moving from one city to another, he was kidnapped. Eventually, we paid the ransom and he was released. That doesn't happen today.
But that does happen today?
Drug trafficking hasn't really disappeared. The big bosses are gone. Sure, there's a drug trade, but it's of a lower level. If you come to the regions in the east, in the west of the country, of course, there are a lot of coca plantations there. So the situation is very much active there. As a result, there's violence, abuse, and even death. The authorities know about it, but they don't care.
But here, surrounded by nature, you don't feel that influence at all. Here, people are used to doing hard physical labor to provide food for themselves. So there is simply no time or desire to use drugs. By the way, I spent the night in a cabin on the property of a local coffee farmer. In the morning, he kindly invited me to his cafe, where he treats his guests to coffee that he himself grows and roasts. The vibe here is peaceful. Guests do yoga to the singing of rare tropical birds, overlooking the incredibly green mountains. A girl named Kali also came down for morning coffee. We started talking and it turned out that she's from North America. She's on a business trip here doing research on climate change. Are you intrigued? Me too. So I talked her into a short interview.
So it's your third time here exactly in this place or in Colombia?
Both. Yeah, both. Yep.
Yeah, I came to Colombia for the first time in 2019 and came up here just because I had an interview in Medellin for some of the things I was working on, and they suggested coming up here, and yeah, every time I've been back, I've come back here. For me, a lot of my work is based on how communities adapt to climate change. So it's really important for me to be able to connect to families and to the community in general. So staying with this family, it feels like my own family, which is really great, and it makes it really easy to do my work, but it also never feels like I'm doing my work at the same time.
Can you please elaborate on that, on your work and what you have studied?
So I study impacts of climate change, but in a social ecological systems approach. So I let the whole thing be really complex. It's not just about an impact of climate and what happens. It's not just about a particular event or a particular forecast. It's about how communities respond to changing conditions and what that means in terms of their livelihoods, but also their culture, how they interact with the government, how they interact with one another. It's really, really complicated, but it's based on people's stories, how they live day to day.
So what do we have to know about that?
Oh, it's really important, because one of the things that we know with climate is it is happening, and you can see it very clearly in Colombia, more so than in other countries. And at the same time, we know that it will continue to happen. It's not something that we can just ignore. So if we can understand how people are responding and how they're adapting, or how they're limited in their ability to adapt, that's going to translate to other countries, not only in terms of how they respond, but also how we understand what it means to be living in a time of climate change. I think there's a tendency for people to have to move to different areas, or have to seek out new opportunities, and have to change a lot of the things that they'd rather not change. It's really complicated. When we think about, migration as a response to climate, it's really complicated. It's not a decision that's just black or white. It's a really difficult decision for people to make, and that's what people are thinking.
People's migration?
Yeah, yep.
So what you predict, from which territory should people migrate where? Where there will be drought, no water?
And that's the thing, right? So here we've got a set of impacts that are occurring here, but we have another set of impacts that are occurring in Medellin, and we have another set of impacts that are occurring in Bogota, and everywhere is impacted, right? So it's a matter of adjusting and adapting, but that's not as straightforward as people make it out to be. The narrative is that, people can just go somewhere else, but somewhere else they're gonna find all sorts of challenges, not just climate challenges, but xenophobia, language barriers, things like that. It's
dictatorship.
Really, yeah, right, political instability.
Another phobia.
Yeah, yep, exactly.
So how do you think what's going to change on our planet in 15 years, in 50 years, 100 years? And what we as a humanity can do with that?
Yeah, I think I was talking with a group of farmers last night, all of whom were in their 70s and 80s, and I asked them, okay, imagine if I left and I came back 10 years from now, what would be different? And they said, and it was surprising, they said, we wouldn't be here. If conditions stay the same, they won't be here. Mm-hmm. And that's something that when we think about climate, we think about that being the scenario 50 or 100 years from now. And when they're telling me, and they know the land better than anyone, if they're telling me that's happening within 10, that's surprising, and it's important that we know that. I think in 10 years, this community is different. I think tourism is this economy that's booming, but it also makes our communities vulnerable. I think in 50 years, it's hard to know, right? Will we still have people who are farming in a sustainable way? Is it even possible on these slopes? I mean, even behind us, there's landslides, there's all sorts of things that you can see that are changing really fast 50 years from now. It's just almost impossible to predict.
Will we survive?
In all of human history, we've found a way, right? We're problem solvers. And that's a good thing, right? In the end, I think that will allow a lot of communities to adapt, but it won't allow all communities to adapt. I think that's going to be an inequality that surfaces and is already surfacing worldwide. Who can and who cannot adapt? Who has the resources and who doesn't? And I think that's the future that we're facing. And it's something that we could begin changing now, but it has to be a part of the conversation now. We're not talking about 50 years, 100 years. We're not even talking about 10 years from now. We have to be having the conversation now.
Your stereotypes about this country.
Yeah, so I've been working in South America and Latin America for a while, and everywhere I've gone has had stereotypes and narratives surrounding it, especially from the U.S. perspective. We're really good at that. Colombia in particular, right? The narrative in the US is that it's kind of a narco-trafficking country, that it's very poor, throughout. It's kind of these universal narratives. And what's strange is this is one of the most diverse countries on the planet. But the narratives are very just black and white, right? And even now, even when I travel now, people are like, well, is that safe? Are you safe? And
is it safe here?
Yeah. And
really?
So, yeah, and that's the narrative in the US. And for me, it's like, well, I feel safer here than I do in my own home country, right? I have no reason to not feel safe here.
In places like this, it should be safe, but in Medellin, in Bogota, going out with your cell phone late at night.
True, yeah, but still, the way I think about that is I can kind of choose my risks there. In the United States, I mean, the way things have gone with shootings, those are random. That could happen in a supermarket. That could happen when I'm buying coffee in the morning. Here I know where I can go and feel safe, and places that I feel, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't go there at night, right? I can make that decision. There's some agency that I have, and in the US I don't feel that. And that's really sad if you think about it.
Just a few words about Colombians and their mentality. What's it about?
Oh, this is the most friendly, open country I think I've worked in. I've had the great fortune of working in a lot of places, and this is the place where everybody welcomes you like family, and I can't even put that into words how wonderful that is. It's really a great opportunity, and I think it's pretty universal across Colombia, and it's really impressive.
You're sleeping just above me, somewhere, with a nice view.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy the sunrise here?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those places where it doesn't matter where you go or where you take a photo. It's always the best photo you've ever taken.
Oh, really?
It's just really great.
We head to the Caribbean coast to the town of Cartagena, perhaps the most controversial city on this trip. After all, it is a maze of old cobbled streets with colonial mansions clustered on either side of them. It looks like an 18th century postcard. And between them there are crowds of tourists and dozens, even hundreds of peddlers who sell anything from cigars to cocaine. After dark, Cartagena seems to take off the mask of a nice town, and members of the oldest profession begin to flock to the streets. Local musicians rap here, and the lines to the clubs are full of drunk and stoned tourists, mostly from North America. But this town is steeped in history, so let me take you to one of the special historical places. This used to be the house where Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the Colombian writer who won the Nobel Prize for Literature and wrote 100 Years of Solitude, was a frequent guest. He and the owner of this building used to host literary gatherings here over rum and coffee, discussing current novels and the overall literary world. Today it is a very famous restaurant in the country, Maricelo, which means sea and sky. Fabian, the founder of the place, met us here and gave us a tour. He told us that when establishing this place he wanted to preserve the feeling and memory of that era. And that is why there are references to some iconic events. Long ago, half a mile from this restaurant, there was a square where they once traded slaves. Their labor was used to establish the first sugar cane plantations in Colombia. They harvested the crop exclusively by hand, cutting the cane stalks with machetes. Then, after several pressings, they extracted the juice that was the key ingredient for rum production. And dance graffiti was created in memory of those slaves who gave their lives in the cane plantations. There is great attention to detail in this restaurant. For example, the chandelier. It took 3 months to make. Candles flow down the strands to form natural wax sweeps. Once you're here, it's if you're going back in time. By the way, the restaurant is very popular and tables are booked for 6 months in advance.
Our project started about 5 years ago when my wife and I saw this building and decided to research the history of Cartagena. We discovered that the first scribe of the city, who was brought here by Pedro de Heredia, wrote a letter to the Queen of Spain asking to live as close as possible to the highest place here. And he wrote this letter using the letter Z and the word cielo, as if it was written in Old Spanish, which is now spelled with the letter C. So we had the idea to call this place Mariziello. In this project, we incorporated experiences from our travels around the country as we studied and learned about the people who grow all kinds of foods and how they use them in their cuisine. Later, my wife, the chef of this restaurant, found uses for all these ingredients in modern dishes, according to their harvest seasons. We also do something similar with alcoholic beverages. We mix them according to modern trends, using the natural harvests of our country.
Now you have the opportunity to describe and reveal the city of Cartagena to a person who hardly knows it. All I have seen is old city and the center and a lot of people who are constantly trying to sell you something. Some souvenirs, something to drink, to smoke, to sniff, and of course a lot of people trying to sell themselves. I would like to hear about the city from a person who has lived here for many years. What is this city like for you?
In fact, tourism is one of the main sources of income for our city. So, I would recommend people to contact agencies that would be able to properly arrange their recreation here, rather than trying to save money on it by trusting it to random passers-by. Because you may end up missing out on the real experience and emotions that this city has to offer.
What's Cartagena all about?
From ancient times until today, Cartagena has been a major hub for international trade because of its strategic location. At one time, the gold and silver looted in the New World and transported through Cartagena made the city so famous that we met people on the other side of the globe who knew of Cartagena's existence, but didn't even realize that it was part of Colombia. Also, Cartagena today is a big mall, a shopping center of Latin America and our country in particular, where you can find anything, culinary and other entertainment, available to the modern tourist.
How long have you lived here?
Since I was 16. That makes it 31.
Cartagena, 31 years ago, and Cartagena now, what has changed for better or worse over that time?
Probably one of the big things is preservation. That is, how they managed to preserve the historical buildings and the history that this city has. After all, 20 years ago, basically no one could imagine such a wave of tourism that we're seeing today. After a few right decisions of the authorities, today people from all over the world can come and enjoy our history. These buildings, because they're in a decent condition and remind us of what happened here and the people who lived here.
What inspired you to establish this place? What is the cuisine here? What are the specifics of the work? Who is the clientele that comes here?
First of all, it's history. The history of this place. The history of this city. That was our main inspiration. When we studied the history of the city, we learned that this whole neighborhood we're in was once a cemetery and considered holy ground. Later, they were allowed to build on it. In our concept, we've created 5 spaces, each of which corresponds to the era of life of each of the families that owned this house. We tried to preserve them to capture that era and the feeling in those spaces. I also became a big fan of bronze and started collecting things from all over the world. I brought my shoal collection here. I was able to mix that feeling of the design elements with the main architecture of the building.
How much money you invested to create this place? When did you reach operational break-even? Has the investment already paid off? And how much does this business bring in on average per month?
Initially, we invested $1 million, which was 25 years of my savings, plus some assistance from the bank. The construction itself took about a year. The project was launched with the expectation of recouping the investment within 5 years. We opened, and 5 months later, the pandemic started. It took us longer to get back into a normal operating cycle. Consequently, instead of 5 years, it will now take us 7 years. Today we have an annual turnover of about 7 billion pesos. That's about $1.5 million.
Do you need to have some connections to open such an establishment? And will it be possible to maintain and develop it without connections?
Actually, money is only one of the tools to create such a place. I've already had offers to open Mariziello restaurants somewhere in Panama or other places. But for me, the most important thing is that DNA of my presence, of my family's presence in the daily development of this place. That is the main reason for our success in this market. And if we can't be present on a daily basis and participate directly ourselves, we won't even try to be a part of it, because we can't split in two to be both here and there.
What's your average bill per table and what is the most popular dish here?
Our average bill today is about $70 to $80. That's taking into account the small amount of drinks consumed. Maybe one cocktail and a bottle of wine per person. If people drink more alcohol, the bill can go up to $120, around that. Regarding the most popular dish is the mar isiala rice dish, a mix of seafood, that is, shrimp, fish, there's also pork, rice with coconut, and it's one of the most popular dishes that people come here and order without even looking at the menu. We've actually been very lucky. In all modesty, people who come here allow us to help them choose the experience that they've come for. And that allows us to make sure that people get the most enjoyment out of being in our restaurant.
What's the most expensive dish on the menu?
The most expensive thing is beef tenderloin on the bone, aged for about 45 days. It's local, Colombian, and it costs about 320,000 pesos, which is about $80.
You can see a lot of refugees from Venezuela on the streets of the city. Today I was at the market and there are many people there who live below the poverty line. Many of them look happy. How do these people affect the city itself, and is Cartagena actually safe? Has it changed in the last 5 to 10 years?
We hired 3 or 4 Venezuelans because they had education when they came here. These people have a desire and passion to work. Of course, people always come with different motivations. But for us, it was very nice to meet those guys and to have them on our team. Because Venezuela is also a country that invested heavily in its people, preparing them for a better life. But because of what's happening there today, they had to change their place of residence. We were lucky. We've met people who are here to be good, upstanding contributors to our society. And that's why they're with us.
Paseando mi soledad por las playas de Marbella, yo te vi Cartagena, siendo tu piel morena, tibia noches de luna, cuando me ves a la brisa, yo soy cartagenera, cascabel de tu risa, cartagenera morena, como ella madura, Cartagena.
The only thing we need for a complete overview of life in Colombia is the opinions of retirees, and we found them in a small gated community half an hour outside of Medellin. To tell you the truth, this is an unplanned interview. We came here to see how Colombians live a quiet life near the metropolis, and while walking around the lake, exploring this neighborhood, we met a nice old gentleman who was feeding the geese. He kindly invited us for a coffee at his house where hummingbirds, the smallest birds in the world, drink water from feeders right on the porch. His wife came out to see us and Senor Carlos just glowed. And we learned the secrets of their long and happy life. How do you spend your day? Do you still work?
No, we don't work anymore. We've worked enough.
I get up at 6 a.m., feed the ducks, read the press. I make her breakfast at 8:30 to 9 a.m. I go to the gym for an hour, then come back and tend to the plants.
And I tend to him.
Do you spend a lot of time with your family?
We used to, not anymore. Christmas with his relatives, then mine, 2 or 3 times a year. Before the pandemic, it separated us a lot. Now we spend most of our time alone.
How do you guys have fun around here?
We love each other. We watch Netflix, go to the movies. We like to work out a lot. We're very active.
We take a lot of walks around the lake.
We often visit our neighborhoods. It's a friendly neighborhood. We get together. For example, yesterday we hung out with 5 neighbors. We can have a few drinks.
What are the myths about Colombia that you disagree with and would like to debunk?
The myth about the violence in Colombia, it's a common misconception of foreigners about the killings that we in our generation had to live through. But today there are far fewer of them. Colombia is a very diverse and beautiful country, but everyone who comes here expects nothing but drugs and lawlessness.
Please, share the secret to a strong and long-lasting relationship.
In our lives, we are companions, friends. We do everything together. Shopping, cooking, we have a lot of love. We played board games together, spend time with friends. I don't know if my husband likes it, but I do.
Can you please tell us how Colombia has changed and how prices have changed recently?
Prices have gone up incredibly. There's been a revaluation, and especially this area, the Valley of St. Nicholas, because of its proximity to Medellin and the resulting increased demand for people to move here. Land here is more expensive than in the city itself today.
How do you think the country has changed in the last 15 years?
Until the last year, it was good enough. But the last election, of course, upset us. We believe that the elections were conducted unfairly, and the person elected has a criminal record. That's a fact. He's been involved in the deaths of people, in kidnappings, and riots in the Palace of Justice itself. To me, that's a bad outcome.
What were the values of your generation and what are the values of young Colombians now?
Everything is different now. It's like night and day. We used to get together and spend a lot of time as a family. Today, we don't. For example, I've been married for 56 years to the same lady, and today, marriages last 6 to 8 months. Young people get together, try to live together, but as soon as they don't like something, they split up. The relationships don't last. No family gatherings. In our time, families had 6 or 8 children. Today, it's 1 or at most 2 children.
If I, for example, came to live here and became your neighbor, how would the locals treat me and what would they say about me?
Very good. We love everyone here and welcome them wholeheartedly. We have a German woman here who's married to a Colombian, 2 families from Venezuela. There were Lithuanians. We're all friendly. We don't discriminate by race or gender. LGBT people are accepted too.
Do you live on your pension? Do you have enough money?
Yes, but of course, we're worried. As labor reform is coming, prices are rising, and purchasing power is falling.
Just a couple of hours drive from Medellin, there is one of the most recognizable rocks in the world. It is named after the 2 towns at its foot, El Peñón and Guatape. They were small farming towns. Locals raised livestock and were engaged in agriculture. In 1954, mountaineer Luis Eduardo Lopez climbed to the top of the rock for the first time. The ascent took 5 days. Later, they built a stone staircase of 740 steps that laces the only break in the rock. You can get up there for $5.20, but be aware that it will take you twice as long to go down, because of the crowds of people piling up on the steps. But it's definitely worth it. The cliff offers a panoramic view of the entire bay. By the way, this huge reservoir around the Rock of Peñón was not always here. It is only 40 years old. The fact is that they had to flood hundreds of acres of fertile land for the construction of the hydroelectric power plant, including an ancient Native American reservation. And now there are dozens of motorboats on the water. All in all, there are about 1,200 houses in Guatape, each of which is bustling with life. Some sell clothes, some decorate the facades of their stores, and in some places, local Colombians spend time with a glass of aguardiente, liqueur made from sugarcane. Strolling through the streets of Guatape, we wandered into an art gallery where we were met by its founder, the artist Antonio Montoya. He paints pictures and even invented his own painting technique. He told us about it and the history of Guatape.
We're in my gallery, Casa de Amarilla, where we're developing my signature technique. which involves painting not with a brush, but with the back of the brush, with the handle of the brush, mixing the colors. This is how we paint with our soul. Hence, the name, nerviosism. This technique is unique in the world. I visited Europe 3 years ago. I visited France, Italy, Spain, and I never found a workshop where they used this technique. People come here from all over the world, and none of them have seen this technique either.
How did you end up here in Guatape?
There was a time when I was a construction worker. I was sent here to build a park nearby. It's called Culebra. And I fell in love with this little town. First, I opened a hardware store here. I finished my contract, and I stayed and worked here. It was a small town, hardly any people, and I loved it. Now I've been living here for more than 20 years, painting. Overall, there are 6 of us working here. These guys are very unique. A lot of them have never painted before. I showed them the technique, and for 2 years now, we've all been creating works using this technique. And we sell our art. I think there are few places in the world where people make a living by creating paintings. And for us, it's magic, uniqueness. This style is 22 to 23 years old. I want to open it to the whole world, to make it recognizable. Not for my sake, no. I don't want money or fame. The guys and I just put so much love and passion into it.
Can you please tell me about the history of Guatape and the rock? There are so many stories and myths about it.
When I came here, the rock was already something of a landmark. But there was no tourism like there is now. Then, the mayor's office allocated money, and it attracted a large number of people. Regarding the rock itself, there's a scientific version that it's the Antioquia batholith. It runs from here, from Guatape, for 40 miles around. It's a rocky underground layer, and what we see on the surface are its above-ground delaminations. Some people say it's a meteorite, but it's not. Someone climbed it once, some rock climber. Then they put up stairs and created what it is today.
What do you think of modern Colombia?
I don't like it. I hate it.
Was it better before? What about safety? All these incidents? Now it's really calmer, it looks peaceful, life is better, tourism is better.
Yeah, look. Previously, there were guerrilla gangs and other militias. A whole range of hardship and violence. But there was also a personal relationship between people. I knew my neighbor. We would get together and have bonfires, sing songs. Everybody knew each other. And we were happy, even though we lived partly in fear. People were killed all around and so on, but it was our cozy little town, our little world. The time of tourism has come, and it's so intense that now we're losing our identity. There's nowhere to go. There's no privacy. Yes, we make money. We're more comfortable financially. But we don't have our town anymore. That old town is gone. Yeah, the workshop is thriving. I also bought a plot of land in the mountains in the wild forest, where I'm making something wonderful. I'm building a magic chalet out of a certain type of bamboo, guadua, which is thicker. Even though I don't have a lot of money, I'm building this place where we will bring people to make their paintings. This is my project that is my life now.
And that's what makes you happy, right?
Yeah, wholeheartedly.
It wasn't long ago that Colombia launched extensive legal cultivation of marijuana. Cannabidiol products have become a multi-billion-dollar industry. Cannabidiol, better known as CBD, is a natural extract of cannabis or regular hemp. Recently, CBD has become so popular in the Americas that it's hard to imagine a place where it is not sold or a disease that isn't treated with it. We arrived at John Jose's huge, enormous plantation where I was immediately offered a joint and given a bush with buds. I think the guy has been smoking since childhood and was born with a joint in his hands. That's a joke. That's what he lives for. He is actually very kind and harmless.
John Jose, 28 years old. He has a degree in agriculture. Basically, he's been engaged in growing crops of various kinds for 8 years. But Since 2018, he's been working at this enterprise. Here we grow 5 types of CBD crops and 1 CBG. This is the branch you're holding. It's a little bit different. All of these strains are used for cosmetic or for medicinal purposes. And basically, all the products from this plantation, they have a crop coming from this plantation every 2 weeks. And they cultivate that way, according to the requirements of the customers. They grow the products so that they can provide a constant supply to their customers. Here we have 16,000 square feet, and there are about 5,600 plants growing here. 5,600. He also talked about his personal use of cannabis, which he consumes several times a day, every 2 to 3 hours. But he says that he has never touched powders or any synthetic drugs. Although, there is a lot of that in his circle. But he and his friends didn't consider consuming them as something of interest or a positive thing. When asked how much he earns here today, he said $2 million. That's about $450 a month. That's considered an average salary in his field, in comparison to his friends, his university group mates. They're doing what they studied for. He's very passionate about the craft, so overall, he's very satisfied and happy that he's able to make a living doing this craft.
Marijuana and the CBD that is extracted from it is being used in treatment even by traditional medicine. No, that wasn't an ad break now. That's right, I am not promoting it at all, believe me. We're here with an alternative medicine doctor who is about to shed some light on the quality of medicine in Colombia. He will tell us how he works in this field, how much money he can make, whether he uses drugs, and overall how all these drugs affect us, which are most often used by mankind not for treatment and not for medical purposes, but for other purposes.
I was born in the region of Santander, in a small town. I came to this beautiful city of Medellin 43 years ago, where I received my medical degree and became a doctor. First, I practiced general medicine. Then, I went into forensic medicine. During this very period, one of the beautiful things that can happen to a person in their life happened. I began to think about the creation of being. And that's how I discovered a new branch of medicine that I'm practicing today. Bioenergetics.
What is the situation with traditional medicine in Colombia? Is there still naturopathy? Can you still be treated using only natural ingredients?
Today, the Colombian government officially allows the practice of unconventional medicine. Somewhere around 40 to 50 years ago, our elders, our doctors, went to Europe and got the first knowledge of homeopathic medicine, which they brought here. We also have a very long history of our medicine practiced by our ancestors, the indigenous peoples of Colombia. We've been able to preserve that too, and pass on knowledge about these traditions of medicine from generation to generation until today. We also studied alternative sources, such as Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine. And some of them have already become official subjects in universities. Therefore, the Colombian Ministry of Health currently authorizes us to practice as doctors of alternative therapies.
Having studied traditional medicine, which for the last 100 years has been treating with antibiotics, pills, and other various chemicals, how did you yourself come to alternative medicine and naturopathy?
30 to 40 years ago, we were the first doctors who, after graduating from medical school, devoted themselves to these unconventional or other alternative directions. We were looked upon as the discoverers of a new world. No one could understand how we, after graduating from university, dedicated ourselves to something other than the standard postulates we were taught there. After all, today they know that if you have a pain, you come, they will prescribe you a pill and tell you that it will help you and it will cure you. But in fact, it's up to you to cure yourself. What are your habits? How you eat? What you look at? What pollutes your vision, your hearing, and your mind? How you treat yourself? And supposedly, people are trying to get healthy in a shortcut through a pharmaceutical solution.
How much a regular doctor makes in Colombia, and how much can you make if you are practicing unconventional medicine?
The situation is very different in both sectors. Almost all private doctors work with insurance companies, and insurance companies serve a large number of patients and can make small payments for each patient. That's the law in this sector, and that's why a lot of people have agreed to it and work that way. I doubt that anyone makes a lot of money. On average, between 5 and 15 million. That's somewhere between $1,000 and $3,000.
The events of 30 years ago affected almost every family in Colombia. Do you have any stories related to what happened then?
During that period, I worked as a forensic doctor. You have no idea how many corpses I saw and how dangerous it was. Today, we often think about what happened to us during this era. We have no idea how we managed to survive all these hardships that we had to deal with. Because there were times when police officers were just killed. And if I was riding a motorcycle and I saw police officers coming from behind in the mirror, I would just move aside so that I wouldn't get hit by a stray bullet that would hit them. So it was very hard to get over that. But thank God, nothing happened to my family.
Doctor, tell me please, have you yourself tried the white powder that is manufactured and sold here?
Of course not. Now, one of my specializations is helping patients with this addiction.
I know a local here who believes that coca leaves are good for us if used properly, just by holding it in your cheek, chewing it or making it tea, for example. Would that be considered healthy? And what are your thoughts of ayahuasca?
First of all, I should mention that the use of coca leaves was very traditional for the indigenous Colombians. Every day, they would mix coca leaves, make little balls of white lime, and put them in their cheeks. This allowed them to get through the day, took away their hunger, their fatigue, and basically kept them in good shape. To date, we have no records or knowledge that the Native American people had any addictions or had any health problems associated with it. The moment the chemical processing of coca leaves started, that's when this problem began. That's when this powder started to be produced, which already has such a vicious effect on the body and the person as a whole, changing it drastically. Regarding ayahuasca, I believe that in this world, it's important to follow the natural path of self-development. I personally know several people who have gone through these ceremonies, and the results of these ceremonies have worked out very positively for them. It has affected their humanity, their spirituality, their understanding of life. But you need to know who you're going into this practice with. Because today, there are so many people who are pursuing their commercial interests, just pouring this drink without accompaniment. Consequently, I believe that this is a ceremony that should and does take place in life, but done correctly and under the right guidance with the right people.
You have two daughters. One is 2, the other is 6 months old. The older one's name is Aluna. I see kids running around here barefoot. No one has phones. No one has cartoons on their iPads. The kids are totally in touch with nature. Kids are eating banana, tangerine, and whatever else they can get right off the tree. They ride around on your bike with you. They are integrated into this world from their first days as born in nature and raised in nature. Was this a conscious choice you made with your wife? And how are you going to live with that going forward? Will they go to school? To kindergarten? What will be the first development of your family?
Of course, it was the idea that they should be born and start their steps in the world here. And when they're 5 years old, we'll take them to a place where they can get a good education. In the north of Colombia, in the Sierra Nevada region, there are 3 tribes of Native Americans who are independent even from the country. They have their own state inside, and they have a belief that the place where they live is the center of the universe. They also have a coal mine nearby, which is one of the largest coal mines in the world. They have a cosmic belief that man and nature are one and the same. And in their language, a luna is the consciousness of nature that contains this world.
You came here, you're from Bogota. You're in fact not really considered a local. You bought 5 acres of land here, opened your own place, started competing with someone else, picking up customers. How have you been received by the local community and what is your relationship with them?
I came here without knowing anyone, and I slowly started to make some connections. I can say that my relationship with my neighbors here in this large territory is closer than it was with the neighbors I lived next door to in my apartment in Bogota.
How do the people who live here, the local population, differ from people who live in a big city like Bogota or Medellin?
The difference is in people's needs. Because in the city, you have everything, all the amenities, and here we sometimes have no water, no light. Sometimes there's some kind of road collapse, and you just need people. And only with people you can deal with some of your problems. So we're more united, because in the city, you can live in an apartment, turn on your TV, order some food by delivery, and it turns out that you live more isolated. Whereas here, we live together as a big family.
Are you Catholic? Do you practice any particular religion?
I was raised Catholic. I can't say that I'm still a Catholic today, but I'm not an atheist. My religion and my God is the sun, which does not judge, which gives us life.
How much does an estate like this with a plot of land cost now?
This house is on a plot of about 1.5 acres. Since the previous owner was a palm tree grower, he brought palm tree shoots and seeds from different parts of the world. Therefore, there are so many varieties of palm trees. This is our house on the property, which has 3 floors. The second floor is completely ours, for my family. On the first floor, we have 4 bedrooms that can accommodate 25 people. It's for friends, guests, relatives, and also for the national cycling team of Antioquia, our region. I'm one of the sponsors of this team. When they come to this region to train, I always host them, cover their necessary expenses, and other things. In total, we have an area of 20 acres, including several buildings for the families who work on our property, and all the plants we grow here. As of today, the cost of this house is approximately $5 to $6 million.
The Pereira region is known for its coffee. You have your own cultivos here. I want to go and look at the coffee you grow here and learn a little bit about what this whole business is all about.
Sure, let's go. I'll show you around.
I assume that this is the place where the people who are responsible for your coffee live. Tell me, what kind of coffee grows here, and about Colombian coffee in general? Why is it so valued all over the world?
Of course, you're right. This is a typical home for the helpers on the coffee plantations, and any other plantation that we have here. These are our employees, and we live very closely with them. We have coffee growing on our property from the time it is a little sprout, coming out of the seed, until it's up to 4 months old and can be moved and planted elsewhere. To date, we have about 200,000 sprouts here, although at one point, it was even up to 1 million. Today, Colombian coffee is the #1 coffee in the world. Consequently, we grow these sprouts here and export them to different countries. We have had requests from Brazil, from Costa Rica, from other more distant countries in the world. We also have all the coffee growing processes on our estate. That is, we not only grow it, we also purify it afterwards. Then from here, we go to the places where it's roasted. And here we also have our own small roasting, which we do. And this is the coffee I want to give you today.
Gracias, parcero, gracias, parcero. But I have another question for you. I take it you're a bachelor. You've traveled a lot, seen a lot of women. What kind of woman do you imagine to be the mother of your children?
Definitely Latina, most likely from the Antioquia region. I love the beautiful curves of the girls. And of course, their perception of the world, because they have very strong family values. Maybe the world sees women from Colombia and Medellin more in the aspect of prostitution. But actually, the women from Antioquia are very family-oriented. They work hard, they're motivated, they have a good scale of values. And for me, this is very important when choosing the future mother of my children.
There are so many expats and nomads coming to Colombia nowadays, and especially from the States and from Canada, because of cost of living, because of food, because of culture, maybe some other opportunities. What do you think, why they come here, and how is it going to change in the next 5-10 years?
Well, I think that that's always there's going to be more and more and more and more. I don't think that's ever going to stop. I think that Colombia has opened up to the world, not just in tourism, but also for people to come live. And I think that it also has a lot to do with, like you say, with the cost of living. But I think it also has a lot to do with that natural kindness of Colombians. People always say that. They come here and they say, these Colombians are so nice and so open and so warm and so welcoming. I think that's something that really grabs people's attention. And as a man, as a heterosexual man, I can say that the women in Colombia are beautiful. They have this essence, they have this mystique and this magic and this fire in them that also makes them very, very welcoming for men that want to come here and maybe find a girlfriend or a wife. And that happens a lot too.
How's the country changed in the last 30 years? And I think it wasn't safe to come here 30 years ago.
In the past 20 years, really, is when the guerrillas started losing power. That's what's really changed, I would say, is that the fact that the guerrillas are no longer so powerful, and we don't have that thing. At one point, I remember 20-some years, 30 years ago, you couldn't go an hour outside of Medellin without having the risk of being stopped on the road by the guerrillas. And if you had any semblance of having a little bit of money, they would kidnap you. And they'd kidnap you for ransom, and sometimes they'd pay the ransom and the person they'd already killed. And they'd have the families paying money and the person was already dead. And so this left a wound sort of in society that really hasn't healed completely.
Honey, come in here.
Sabi, come here.
She's 8.
8, yeah.
Like my Emma, I have 2 daughters. One is 13 and the other one is 8. I just want to know, do you let her go outside alone?
Alone? No. But I mean, I wouldn't let her go outside alone anywhere. I mean, yeah, I mean, outside, you mean on the street to go?
When she turns 15.
Yeah, I have to.
Is it safe for kids to go outside alone?
Yeah. I mean, there's risks that are inherent anywhere in the world. You know, you have child predators everywhere in the world. You know, and that's something that you have to worry about as a parent. But like I said, it's also a country where people are very social. You know, if somebody sees a child that's on the street crying and by herself or by himself, immediately look at them, hey, what's the matter? Where are your parents? And people will help. Colombians we're a very close-knit society, and we do help each other a lot in that sense.
Can we compare Americans and, the Americans from the United States of America and Latin Americans like Colombians? What's the difference in mentality, behavior, and values?
Colombians are a lot more joyful than American people from the United States. Families are a lot closer. People spend a lot more time with their parents and with their siblings. And for example, in the United States, when your parents get to a certain age, they send them off to an old folks home, right? Here, that's almost unheard of. You know, everybody has their mother and their father in their older age living with them in their house and always together. That's one of the really good examples. I think also that because of the differences in economics here. People here are a little bit harder workers in general, because it's odd to meet somebody in Colombia that kind of lives off their parents and doesn't do anything, where it's more common to find that in the United States. I think that people in the United States have a much more stronger love or patriotism for their country as such. They're more willing to join the army and go to war for their country, for example, than here. You know, people here join the army out of necessity because they have no other option. You know, it's not like, oh, I want to go fight for my country. There is a little bit of that, but not nearly as much as in the United States. The United States are much more patriotic. But I think that goes back also to our history, from being a Spanish colony, you know, and there was you know, having slaves and having the culture here mixed a lot more than, say, for example, in North America. The natives were always on their own. Here, during the time of the conquest, 500 years ago until 200 years ago when the revolution happened, there was always a mixing of the races, mixing between Africans, between natives here, the white colonists from Europe. So you see that there's for example, in North America, there's not that mix. You still have the races whereas here you have what we call the mestizo. Mm-hmm. The mestizo is the mix between native and European, right? And that's the most common DNA here in Colombia, right?
What would be your recommendations for those who want to relocate to Colombia?
If you really want to get the best out of Colombia, it's mixing with Colombians. It's letting your guard down. I think a lot because of the stereotype, people are kind of afraid, you know, with all they're going to be taken advantage of, you know, and that's a possibility. But it's a much bigger possibility that you're going to meet really wonderful people and you're going to make friendships and family ties that you never expected, and that will be the best thing that have happened to you in your life. And to have an open mind and an open heart. Colombia is a very complex onion. So when you get here, start peeling off the layers, you know, and discovering all the wonderful flavors and aromas that are inside. If you don't like physical contact, don't come to Colombia. Because people here, you know, when they meet you, sometimes they'll hug you. They'll shake your hand and hug you. Between men and women, sometimes there's a kiss when you meet, which happens in many countries, you know. But here people are very, very warm and welcoming.
What do you do for a living and how much you make?
It depends. I mean, in Colombia, we have a minimal wage. That's like how much money you get per month, the minimum that somebody can pay you. And this is about $200, $250. In average, if you are a professional, you have a career, you are a teacher, for example, you are an engineer, you are a professor in Colombia, you get about, let's say $500, $450, right? But there is some people, a lot of people that get less than that. So that's why wife and husband work together, and sometimes they have a second business, right, to complement the economy. So in general, in average, let's say that a Colombian person in Colombia is getting about $300, $400 per month.
Mm-hmm. And you?
Ooh. In my case, I'm working in one of the best economy segments in Colombia now, which is tourism. Tourism is growing a lot. I work as a guide, and I'm an independent guide. I work for different companies. And for example, one day of my job, one single day is about, let's say $20, $30, right? In a month, I can work, for example, in a good season, let's say about 20 days, right? So in that way, I can get sometimes easily $500, $600 per month, right? And sometimes more, sometimes less. That's like the way.
How Colombia changed in the last 30 years?
Oof, I guess a lot, and tourism is maybe one of the main engines. Why is changing a lot? First of all, because in Colombia, as I mentioned, we are tired of conflict. And I guess conflict is super expensive for Colombia. Not only for buying weapons and paying soldiers and all that. It's also crazily expensive because people were afraid to come to Colombia because it was dangerous years ago.
I was afraid to come here.
Exactly. So now it's changing and you are coming. So this is very good. So for tourism is very good. So tourism is becoming an engine. People is seeing that having peace is a very good idea, right? I can tell you, the coca, the marijuana, the drugs took thousands and millions of affected people here in my country. So this is why we understood that it's not a good way. That's why, for example, we are becoming guides, we are becoming engineers, doctors, and all that. And it's because we're having a better access to the education. And having a better access to the education is people that, if you ask to a guy now in Colombia, hey, do you want to get a gun and go in the middle of the jungle and start suffering a lot of water in the middle of snakes and everything, escaping from the army, or you want to go to university, you want to have a family, you want to have a career, I can tell you, a lot of Colombians will go to the right-hand side. And I guess this is why we are having peace, because I guess this is a very deep transformation of the Colombian society. And this deep transformation, it was because of all the pain that we got now. And I guess this is why the peace is coming to Colombia, and it will be a very stable peace in the years. Because it's a peace that is not only done by the president and the guerrillas. It's a peace that is done in the people, in the families. In my personal opinion, the richness of a country are not only the natural resources. Maybe the main richness of a country is the people. And this richness increases when the people is better educated. So I guess this is what is happening in my country, that Colombia recently, in the last years, is receiving more support from the government, and the people is getting more access to the education. And I guess that's one of the main changes of my country. I'm so happy that people like you come to my country. I guess now you become an ambassador of my country, and I guess you make a very important part of the transformation of how people see my country out of my country. So thank you for coming.
Bendiciones.
Bendiciones, parcero.